University, right across the street there, all the way to Union Station, then from the south side of Olive, all the way to the railroad tracks. And that was the urban renewal footprint of Mill Creek. Now, Mill Creek started off as a very wealthy community. It was a wealthy white community. It started about the late 1850s. And about 1900, those wealthy white people who were always trying to get away from the city decided that they were going to move further west. Because when they moved to Mill Creek at that time, in the 1850s, 1860s, was rural. It was nothing here. And they wanted to get away from the smoke, from the factories, from the immigrants. And so they moved into this area, and it was where all the wealthiest white people in the city lived. Well, when they abandoned that area, it left it open for blacks and immigrants to move in. And it eventually became a predominantly black neighborhood. By 1959, when it was destroyed by urban renewal, there were about 20,000 people living there, give or take a few hundred, 5,000 families, 839 businesses, 43 churches. Every major black institution in the city was located in Mill Creek. But one of the things that I did want to, one of the things we're doing with our exhibit is that we're trying to explode those stereotypes of black communities and of Mill Creek as a slum, because that's how it was described when they decided that they wanted to tear it down. But it was a myth. And one of the things we want to do with our exhibit, and what Vivian has done and what Malika has done, is that they have exploded these myths about this community. But just to put it in some sort of context, you have to realize that St. Louis was a segregated community. It was Jim Crow. And I was going to read the quote from Bill Clay. But Bill Clay, who grew up in segregated St. Louis, described it as just as segregated as any city in the Deep South, as just as segregated as any city in Mississippi, Georgia, or Florida. Black people could not go to any of the theaters, they could not go to the restaurants, they could not go to the hotels, they could not go to the amusement parks. There was nowhere that black people could go, and their movement, the spaces where they lived, were tightly controlled. So if you lived in St. Louis during this period, up to 1959, there were only, well, really, we'll go to 61 and beyond. We can even go beyond that to 68 and beyond that, because we're still having those problems. There were only certain places that black people could live. One of the spaces was Mill Creek. Another was DeVille. And then there were a few scattered other places, like in Carondelet. But basically, these were the only places you can live. So when they described Mill Creek as a place that was occupied by impoverished people, that in a sense is kind of a myth as well. I want to quote a Lilia Bundles. Lilia Bundles was the great-granddaughter of Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker, the wealthy hair care entrepreneur who got her start in Mill Creek, lived in Mill Creek, by the way. But she said that because of segregation, you have working-class people, laborers, middle-class people, all living on the same block. It was very economically diverse. So when you hear people talk about this impoverished neighborhood, it was not really that way. The first black bank, well, not the first black bank, full-service black bank, because there was another one in 1915, but it was located in Mill Creek in 1923, when they decided to build the first commercial building built by black people. It was built in Mill Creek. In fact, Joseph Mitchell, who was the founder of the St. Louis Argus, who was a major investor in the People's Finance Corporation, the Black Bank, and People's Finance Building, that black commercial building, he said it was the first commercial building built by black people in the country. The Globe Democrat, which was a white daily that usually didn't cover what was going on in the black community, said that it was the first commercial building built by black people in the world. Now that's quite, I don't know if that's true, but it was a big deal for these things to be built in St. Louis. The Black YMCA, the only YMCA in the city of St. Louis for black people, was in Mill Creek. The Black YWCA, the only black YWCA in the city, was in Mill Creek. So basically, the major black newspapers, every black major newspaper was in Mill Creek. The Clarion, the Afro-American, and of course the St. Louis American and the St. Louis Argus. And just to give you an idea, I'm not going to go too long with this because we have some people up here who are very much experts on these issues. But just to give you the kind of people that lived in Mill Creek, Dr. Ottawa Fields, who was called the wealthiest black doctor in the state of Missouri. lived in Mill Creek. Joseph Mitchell lived in Mill Creek, the founder of the St. Louis Argus, the major investor in the People's Finance Corporation, major investor in the People's Finance Building. He had his newspaper in Mill Creek. Crittenden Clark, who was one of the first black graduates of Washington University Law School, graduated in 1896, lived in Mill Creek and was there until the day he died. So I could go on and telling you about all the people that lived in Mill Creek. But when you hear those myths about the slum, and it is a myth, and it's a smear, and it's a lie.
It's a lie. That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher, who is a Mill Creek resident.
An original
Mill Creek resident. Well, you didn't go back to 1900, but
30.
you were very close, very close.
1930s.
Okay,
It's the
so
1950s.
okay, so with that, I just wanted to give you some background, and just so you know, just some context about why this community developed, who lived there, and what this community was about. And I'll rely on Vivian and Dr. Horn to talk about how it came to be destroyed. And we have a particular tree with Prince Wells, who is a esteemed music historian and musician, very distinguished, who was going to talk about the music and the culture of Mill Creek. Walter Johnson, who wrote The Broken Heart of St. Louis, if you're familiar with that book, described Mill Creek as the Harlem of St. Louis. And that's because there was a lot of rich culture there. Music, black music, we can almost argue that it got its start in Mill Creek because it was ragtime. The ragtime developed into the blues, and the blues into rock and roll, and the rock and then into jazz, and the jazz. So it went on, but it all got started in Mill Creek. And this is a lot of the history that people don't know about this particular community when they describe it as a slum, a community full of impoverished black people, where rats was big as Cocker Spaniels, and somebody actually said that. But anyway, so we're going
lies that were told.
Yes, many lies that were told, but we're here to tell the truth. So we're going to start with Vivian and Dr. Horn.